Okay, all. So you heard me talk about, in part 1, I was up to the part where the natural treatment, in my opinion, which seems logical, if you'll go review that, please tell me if I'm being illogical, okay? 4 tumors were gone, and the large tumor had shrunk by about 10% in size. But the oncologist did not care about this. This was his response, okay? Because to me, she opted for this treatment protocol, and 4 tumors disappeared and 1 tumor shrunk. But it's amazing how anything can be spun into a negative. I would be ecstatic. You would naturally be ecstatic too, right? I mean, think about it. But he already had denied the possibility that the 4 tumors, the 4 small ones, were gone. The large one, however, this was his excuse. And yes, I'm calling it an excuse. He says, what happens with tumors is sometimes, because they're comprised, and this part is correct, of a lot of blood vessels. They keep building blood vessels and blood vessels and blood vessels. It's called angiogenesis. Sometimes they collapse on the inside, and it makes it look like they're smaller, but in reality they're about to explode and spread all over the body. So her shrinking tumor and her 4 disappeared tumors now became an emergency to him and his portrayal to her. And at this point, he had given her no medications, no painkiller, what they call palliative care. She didn't need it. She looked great. She lost 30 pounds. It was over a period of about 7 months, this whole natural protocol, even though she had been given 3 months to live at the Mayo Clinic and told she may have 6 months to live if she took chemo. 7 months later, 7 months later, 4 tumors were gone. Her large tumor had decreased by about 10% in size, but her doctor turned it into a negative. I want you to hear this. I want you to be prepared, because he said it was going to explode and spread. No logical explanation for the others disappearing, so it couldn't possibly happen to the large one too. My theory is that her nutritional protocol decreased her body's need for those tumors. Now, I didn't think about the need for the tumors. That was Stephanie Seneff, PhD's theory that she put in this article in the recent Wise Traditions from the Weston A. Price Foundation. This is the one I just got, Volume 14, Number 4, Winter 2013 edition. And the article is called Cancer to the Rescue: How Tumor Cells Work Over Time to Restore Vascular Health. And this woman has a PhD from MIT. I didn't take my theory that far. My theory was about the activity. Remember in part 1 I mentioned the activity. Well, the CT scan, besides the resections and showing the actual tumor being there and the size, also showed the activity level. Well, her large tumor that had shrunk had an increase in activity. And for oncologists brainwashed by the system, this was bad, okay? The shrinking meant it was going to implode and explode and spread. And the increase was a sign that that was about to happen. Now, that may be true. That may be something that happens a lot. But is that happening in people who are doing a protocol? In people who have 4 other tumors that have completely disappeared? Or is that happening in people who look like they have cancer, feel like they have cancer, have positive blood marker tests, who are not getting off of medications, who haven't lost weight, who don't look better than they've looked in 20 years? She looked fabulous. Her doctors, the nurses that didn't realize that she was on a natural treatment, she would walk in and they would say, "You're like a miracle." And they would look at the other people with their ports, the people that looked like they were going to die. And then they would say to her, "You just don't look like you have cancer. It's a miracle." Not realizing the whole truth. They may have known she wasn't on standard medicine, but they certainly did not know she was on a natural treatment protocol. So the activity increasing, no good, according to this doctor. This upset my mother so much because my mother had made so many changes. She hated the bitter taste of that MSM powder. She hated it. She also took, IP6 with inositol. Pardon me. She also took that with the protocol. I had forgotten that. She hated that bitter taste. She hated blueberries. And that was what the cod liver oil and the sulfur and the vitamins and the amino acids were all mixed in with it. She gagged on that thing every day. My stepfather took the shake with her every morning. He also lost 35, 40 pounds. His beer gut that I had never seen him without disappeared during the 7 months. Along with her, they looked great. She had gotten off so many medications. The only medications that were left was Zoloft and Buspar. And I want you to see how I feel about antidepressants. I talk about them throughout many of my videos. I think they're dangerous. I think the studies are fraudulent. And I think they contributed to her cancer along with statin medications. It devastated her that she wasn't seeing the progress she wanted in the doctor's eyes. I saw it. I saw it because she was getting off all these medications. Actually, for a while, they wouldn't take her off the blood pressure medicine, and it was getting too low, and that's why she had to stop it. So, my mom decided that to speed up her body's healing, she was going to quit cold turkey her antidepressants. And she did. And there was an immediate change in her. She told me, Heather, if I have to eat broccoli and brown rice the rest of my life, I think I'd rather die. She told me, that's what life insurance is for. You'll all be fine. She became effectively suicidal pretty much immediately within a day. She also stopped eating. And she had had no trouble with, appetite like many cancer patients. That wasn't an issue before. She hadn't had nausea. She didn't have pain. None up to this point. Okay, later she did. She didn't want to eat because she said, no, I need to fast. Because the protocol involved some fasting, but she was taking a ton of nutrients. She had, the almonds, she had the carrot juice, she had the smoothie in the morning, and then she had a full meal every night. But once she quit that Zoloft, she didn't want to eat. And I tried to explain to her, you have to eat. She had an appointment 3 days after she got into this mental state that was because of stopping antidepressants cold turkey, which I didn't understand at that point in my life, but now I do. Many people flip out and kill people when they stop antidepressants cold turkey or themselves. So my mom's reaction was actually mild. She went to the doctor. I was there. They drew blood. She passed out. I knew enough that it was low blood sugar. I said to the nurse, please get her juice. It's low blood sugar. She hasn't been eating. The nurse gave her juice. She immediately woke up. The doctor said, it's now or never. Your activity is increasing. You've lost your appetite. And, you're weak. So this natural protocol that you're doing is hurting you. Once again, not mentioning the shrunken tumor, getting off of medication, losing 30 pounds, looking fabulous, having no pain, or the missing 4 tumors. I'm going to order a full nutritional profile, he said. You're starving. The nutritional profile came back fine. She was nourished, very well nourished, actually. There were no deficiencies. Her blood sugar was low because she didn't eat for 3 days because of Zoloft, a fraudulent medication that kills people. That's why. That was her turning point. The story isn't that long after that, and I'll go to part 3, and I will talk about the good news, which is this woman's article. Okay. on the next part. But first, let me finish my mom's story. She started the chemo. And for almost 4 years, she was on a variety of medications. First was like a regular chemo. She ended up, she did lose her hair. It did grow back. They would put her on it for a little while, and then they would take her off. Her hair would start to grow back. They would put her on something again. Her hair fell out again. And it made her sick. And it wasn't working. It didn't work. It slowed the process down because the way chemotherapy, this first type of chemotherapy works, and most chemotherapy is they kill cancer cells a little bit faster than they kill regular cells because cancer cells replicate faster than regular cells. And because they do that, the chemo actually works without really selecting, or this particular one anyway, most chemo, which cell. It's just that because cancer cells replicate faster, they die a little faster than you. But it's killing the tumor and it's killing you. And according to this woman's theory, that tumor, it might be trying to save you. And according to my theory, that activity increasing. I said, this was my theory, if they're going away and she's getting healthier, how do we know the activity isn't just her immune system doing what it's supposed to do, healing her body? It's doing something in there. I didn't know what. I didn't have a PhD from MIT, but it didn't make sense to me. The sugar was going in, the tumor was doing stuff, but it was getting smaller and other tumors were going away, so something must have been getting accomplished if you have faith in our body to know what's right. So anyway, she got diarrhea that was so severe eventually because she had been on it for so long. She outlived anyone that I think they had ever known with cholangiocarcinoma on the chemo too. And I believe that she lasted so long on the chemo, way longer than that 6 months. I believe she lasted that long because of the nutritional protocols she did before, storing up her vitamin A, storing up her vitamin D, storing up amino acids in her body, getting nourished. It got her ready for the poison, so it didn't kill her as fast. And I believe that. So I think that's why it lasted so long, but it didn't work on the cancer. In the meantime, she got more and more tumors. They stopped going away, they started increasing. The big one didn't explode yet. But she got to a point, her immune system was compromised. She had diarrhea so bad that when she would eat a bite of food, she was running to the bathroom within seconds. Just the activation of her digestive system would activate. She was dying from it, so they took her off. And they let her heal for a while. But then the tumors exploded. They started growing. It spread. But the activity was decreasing while the chemo was killing her. Her activity was decreasing. Her activity was increasing on the natural protocol while she was getting healthier and the tumors were disappearing. Now, remember what the doctor said. It's going to explode and spread. At this point, it hadn't exploded, but other ones were popping up. Okay? They took her off for a while. I had a wedding coming up. She was afraid she wasn't going to be there. So she decided to try something different called a biological agent. It is a biological agent that would cut off oxygen to the tumor because it would supposedly suffocate it and cause it to die. Now remember the theory that the tumor is trying to save you and that the activity is actually doing something good for you. That's just a theory. This biological agent didn't just cut off oxygen to her tumor. It cut off oxygen to her entire body. She couldn't stand up and walk 2 feet because she felt like she was suffocating. She turned whiter than I've ever seen her. It literally was eating away her blood because your oxygen is carried in your blood, and somehow she needed blood transfusion after blood transfusion after blood transfusion. Finally, they gave her several units of blood right before my wedding, and I remember the color coming back into her. And I remember thanking the doctor, because if he didn't give her someone else's blood, she wouldn't have been in my wedding. But you can only receive a certain number of transfusions in your life, and then your body doesn't accept them anymore. And that was her last able transfusion for my wedding. My husband and I were moving a few months after that for him to begin medical school. And she kept things from me from that point on. I think she didn't want me to worry. She wanted me to move on with my life and be happy. After we moved in August, she died October 29th, 2010. From this biological agent, from cancer, from chemo, from a nutritional deficiency, whatever you want to call it. And please, please tune in to the good news in the next part. She died, and what I found out that she had been hiding from me was the tumor finally did explode, and it finally did spread and cause these spore-like growths of tumors all over her liver. She got ascites, which is the swelling of the belly, and once that happens, that's a bad sign. And then she went through her process of dying. On a side note, when hospice was finally called in, she had a do not resuscitate filled out, and I want you to keep in mind that if you ever fill out a do not resuscitate, be careful how you word it. She didn't want, the paddles and life support, and that's why she had that. She wanted to die. But what ended up happening was they started giving her morphine. She was in a lot of pain. So I'm not, could she have used medicinal marijuana? Probably. It would have not only extended her life, according to recent studies, but it would have helped with her pain, at least, and maybe prevented the pain getting so bad that she needed morphine, or at least prolonged until she would have needed it. But besides that, eventually she needed morphine. But what morphine does is it takes away your ability to swallow. And you have to know this if you're going to call in hospice, and you have to know this if you're going to take conventional medicine, and you have to know this if you're going to sign a DNR. Even without a DNR, this could be common practice, what I'm about to tell you. And what I'm about to tell you, I believe, is called murder. And it's caused a great amount of stress, my opinion on this, between me and my family. Because I don't believe in helping someone die so they can go be with Jesus. I have my own faith and I believe in Messiah, but I'm not into euthanasia. Okay? I think it's a form of murder. But she didn't know what to expect, and no one understands the process of death until you've either lived through it with a loved one or you're going through it, and then you can't talk and tell anyone what you want because you're too weak. She could not swallow to get fluids. And as you know, people die without fluids within 24 to 72 hours. Someone with cancer, maybe less. Hospice was in her house for 3 days before she died. Once hospice got called in, things progressed quite quickly. The morphine increased. She could not swallow. She couldn't get up to go to the bathroom, so a catheter was inserted. Blood was coming out of the catheter, and antibiotics were deemed unnecessary, which that's debatable. I'm not going to say that's murder. But fluids were denied. The oxygen-depriving medicine was, of course, stopped because what's the point when she was about to die? But oxygen mask was given. So they were willing to give her oxygen to not let her suffocate. But they were not willing to give her fluids. Now, feeding her water, yes, she could have choked, but it's called an IV, guys. Okay, it's an IV. I don't think that an IV is the same as the paddles and life support. I don't think that giving someone fluid so that they don't die of thirst, I don't think that is an extreme measure. Did she die of thirst quicker than she would have died from cancer? I believe so, and I believe that's murder, and that is common practice, and the excuse that they give is that when someone dies, a lot of fluids come out, and that is true. And we don't need to get into the details, but you know what? She wasn't given water, and it still happened. It still wasn't pleasant. It was still the hardest thing I've ever lived through, other than losing a baby at 12 weeks. Baby, human life. It was still not pleasant. I had no control over her care, so I couldn't change that. I can't administer an IV. My husband was in med school. I was there. When she finally died, that moment, I'm the one that felt her pulse was gone. But they let my husband call the time of death, and he called the time of death on October 29th, 2010. She died. She died from the medicine. She probably would have died sooner if they had removed that tumor. And I didn't even mention the radiation that she did end up getting on her hands, because the chemotherapy gave her skin cancer. And she had to have the back of her hands cut off, and it wouldn't heal because of the chemotherapy. They sewed it up. It wouldn't heal until finally it burnt her down to the bone. Radiation is not good either, guys. And when they removed that tissue, or it fell off, or whatever happened, it wouldn't heal until they put a vacuum sucker on her, little vacuum hose, and it healed their hands. So I'm sorry to be so... It's taken me years to even be able to talk about it. This is why I don't like doctors and hospitals, and this is why I don't like drugs. So tune into part 3, and I'm going to talk about this article. This is the good news, okay? Cancer to the rescue. And my theory that her tumor activity, was a good thing. And so their criteria claiming that was dictated a need for chemotherapy is wrong. And years later, we may all know this and look back, and those doctors might want to kill themselves. Tune in to part 3, guys.